The thing I love about games like Castlevania and Axiom Verge is how much time I spend studying and exploring the fully realized settings they've constructed. But what I love about the new game Iconoclasts is that it not only gives us an interesting world to discover, but also spends a lot of time fleshing it out and giving us a gripping and emotionally satisfying story. This is one of the few Metroidvania-style action games that made me genuinely care about the characters. Iconoclast is the passion project of Joakim Sandberg, who started this love letter to classic 16-bit games all the way back in 2010. He was inspired by games like Monster World 4 and Metroid Fusion, adding his own spin to the formula and writing an ambitious story with major twists and political intrigue. The result is a masterfully designed action game that's a lot deeper and longer than you might expect. This is the story of Robin, a recently orphaned teenage girl with a strong penchant for fixing things. She lives in a dystopian fantasy world controlled by an authoritarian cult known as the One Concern that controls access to the world's tools and technologies. This is a world where everybody has assigned jobs, and you don't dare step out of line. But when Robin finds herself on the wrong side of the government, she flees and sets off on an adventure filled with action, intrigue, and a whole bunch of memorable characters. What we have here is a game that looks like it's going to be just another Metroidvania throwback, but ends up subverting the genre in some important ways. Instead of just doing a lot of the usual action stuff, Iconoclast gives Robin a lot of reasons to use her giant wrench. This isn't some 2D Ratchet & Clank game, but rather an adventure with a heavy emphasis on puzzle solving. The game does a good job of throwing you into these isolated levels filled with puzzles to work out. There's still the usual exploration and studying that you get with this type of game, but it's been mixed with a bunch of brain teasers. At the same time, these stages are still connected to the rest of the larger world, so there's still a fair amount of going back and using your new abilities to find hidden items and fill in the map. Speaking of which, Iconoclast avoids a lot of the cliche weapons and upgrades you normally see in this type of game. What we find is that both the wrench and the gun will be upgraded multiple times throughout the lengthy quest, eventually giving Robin the ability to shoot rockets, create sparks, and even teleport. And every time you get one of these new upgrades, it opens up all kinds of new challenges to work out. Even when a weapon or ability seems geared for combat, the game still finds a way to weave it into the puzzle solving. Iconoclasts also introduces a crafting system that'll allow you to build perks with rare materials that you find scattered around the world. You'll be able to create a number of perks that'll do everything from give you extra health, to increase weapon damage, to giving Robin stronger lungs so that she can breathe underwater longer. These are a small part of the game, but it gives you a lot of incentive to explore every part of the large, connected world. What this game does well is that it finds ways to change the stakes. In a lot of Metroidvania-style games, you'll get thrown into a large world and then told to look around, usually with only one central goal in mind. In the case of Iconoclast, the missions are always changing. Every single time you think you know what's going to happen next, Iconoclast finds a way to rip you out of that comfort zone and mix things up in refreshing ways. And it's long, clocking in at well over a dozen hours. Joakim has packed a staggering amount of story beats in what could have very easily been just another retro-themed action game. And that brings us right back to what this game does best. It tells a compelling and well-written story that doesn't always go the way you expect. Robin is social and always running into memorable new faces. She'll eventually team up with other characters in order to solve the quests and take on the One Concern. This allows the game to flesh out these characters and give them a real arc, something you don't always get with this kind of adventure game. This goes a long way to make this dystopian future feel real and lived in, which in turn goes a long way to helping me care about Robin and her friends. The weakness this game has is that the combat never comes together like it should. I love the puzzle solving and the exploration, but found the running and gunning element to be a bit lacking. Instead of giving us the typical dual stick aiming, we're treated to an auto lock-on system that doesn't always work properly. This feels like a concession made at some point in the last 8 years, and not an inspired gameplay decision. Whether intentional or not, the auto-aim doesn't always get the job done. Sadly, the combat does not improve when we're forced to switch to Robin's traveling companion, Mina. She's a good character and ends up having one of the most interesting storylines, but the shotgun she carries is unwieldy at best. The aiming is slow and cumbersome, leading to some of the most frustrating moments in Iconoclasts. But even when you're controlling Robin, you'll wish the controls were tightened up a bit. On the other hand, I can't imagine this game looking any better than it does now. Joakim absolutely nails the mid-1990s pixel look, giving us a game full of vibrant backgrounds that are constantly changing. And it's not just the 16-bit look, but also the animation. There were so many times the game would throw in an extra frame or two that most games would normally ignore. It's the way Robin not only runs in for the hug, but then settles into the embrace. There are small touches like this scattered throughout the entire adventure. I just can't imagine anybody being disappointed by the graphics on display here. Iconoclast works as not only an exciting run-and-gun action game, but also a great story filled with likable characters. Joakim Sandberg has spent the better part of a decade crafting a fully realized world with a strong emphasis on puzzle solving. Sure, there are times when the game veers too far into the Metroidvania cliches, and the combat isn't as tight as it should be. But Iconoclast is one of the most unpredictable action games you're gonna play this year. Hey, thanks for watching our review. So here's the question of the day. Who is your favorite Metroidvania action hero? And it doesn't have to be from one of the Metroid or Castlevania games, I'm just talking about the subgenre in general. Let me know in the comments below. In other news, we're just a couple of days away from the debut episode of Game Over, the early years. But before that, look for a review of Space Invaders Extreme and a brand new episode of Review Rewind. I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.